The letter came on a Tuesday. The paper was crisp and official, with the shiny logo of Halcyon Properties in the corner. My hands, dotted with age spots I still wasn't used to, didn't shake as I read it. They thought that was a sign of weakness, I guess. The calm of old age. They called it a generous offer for my house and land. I called it a theft dressed up in legal language. I'd lived in the little blue house on Maple Lane for 46 years. I'd raised my son here, buried my husband from here. Every crack in the driveway, every sagging floorboard, was a chapter in my life. Now, Halcyon Properties wanted to build their Halcyon Vista luxury condominiums, where my roses grew. I placed the letter on the kitchen table, next to a photograph of me and Thomas, my husband. He was smiling, forever young. "They think I'm too old to fight, Tom," I said to the silent room. A fire I hadn't felt in years began to smolder in my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a deep, cold certainty. I looked out the window at my garden. The peonies were just starting to bud. Halcyon's offer had a deadline. 30 days. They likely pictured a lonely old woman, overwhelmed by paperwork, eager for a simple check and a quiet apartment somewhere. They saw the white hair and the slow walk. They didn't see the memory of a woman who'd worked a city planner's office for 35 years. They didn't see the files still stored in boxes in the basement. They thought I was too old to fight back. As I watched a brave sparrow chase a much larger crow from the bird feeder, a small smile touched my lips. They were wrong. The first step was reconnaissance. That's what Thomas would have called it. He'd been a history teacher, loved military terms. I put on my sturdy walking shoes and my sun hat. To anyone watching, I was just another senior getting her afternoon exercise. I walked every inch of Maple Lane and the surrounding 3 blocks. I saw the other letters. Mrs. Gable at number 24 was in tears on her porch. The Millers at number 18, a young couple with a baby, looked panicked. "It's not enough to buy another house in the city," I heard Mr. Miller say into his phone, his voice strained. For sale signs were already popping up like poisonous mushrooms. I noted everything. Which houses were owned, which were rented. I saw the men in sleek suits walking the street, pointing, making notes on tablets. They didn't even glance at me. I was part of the scenery, an old fixture soon to be removed. That night, I descended into the basement. The air was cool and carried the scent of old paper and memories. There, in labeled boxes, were my files. Not just household records, but my work from the city planning department. Zoning maps, council meeting minutes, environmental impact report templates. The tools of my old trade. I hauled a box upstairs. My bones ached, but the fire kept me going. I spread a 15-year-old zoning map of our neighborhood on the dining table, weighting the corners with teacups. I knew laws changed, but foundations remained. Halcyon Properties had a plan. But so did I. I started with Mrs. Gable. Beatrice. She was 82, with a spine of steel disguised by a fluffy, gentle appearance. I brought her my lemon pound cake, a known peace offering. "Beatrice, we can't let them bulldoze our history," I said, cutting the cake. "What can we do, Martha?" she sighed, her hands fluttering. "They're a big company. Lawyers. Money. We have something they don't," I said, leaning forward. "We have this street. We have time. And we have the truth." I told her my idea. Not a protest, not yet. Information. A meeting. Just the homeowners on Maple Lane. She agreed, her eyes gaining a little of their old spark. Using her ancient but reliable address book, we made calls. Not everyone was brave. The Millers were desperate, but hopeful we could help. Old Mr. Peterson at number 12, a retired grump, just snarled, "Fight City Hall? Fool's errand." But he agreed to come. We met in my living room. 7 homeowners, faces etched with worry. I stood before them, my heart pounding. I wasn't a leader. I was a retired clerk. "They've offered us below market value," I began, my voice firmer than I felt. "They're counting on us being scared, isolated, easy to pick off one by one. But if we stand together, we are not easy. We are a problem." I showed them my old maps. I explained zoning variances, community input procedures. Things they'd never thought about. What's the first move? Asked Mr. Miller. We all say no, I said. Unanimously. We buy time. Then, we find out exactly what Halcyon is planning, and we find the cracks in their foundation. For the first time in weeks, the air in the room didn't feel heavy with defeat. It buzzed with a fragile, newfound hope. The unanimous rejection letters were mailed. The response was swift. A week later, a black car pulled up to my house. A man in an expensive suit got out. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His name was Adrian Vance, Vice President of Acquisitions for Halcyon. Ms. Delaney, he said, oozing charm. May I come in? I feel there's been a misunderstanding. I let him in. He sat on my sofa, looking utterly out of place. He complimented the house, called it charming, but his tone said, obsolete. The offer is very fair, he said. Given the age and needed repairs of the properties here, this project will revitalize the area. Think of the progress. I am thinking of the people, I said calmly. This is our home, not a development zone. His smile tightened. Ms. Delaney, with respect, a prolonged fight will only cost you legal fees, stress at your age. We can even offer a bonus for a quick, quiet sale. Help you into a lovely assisted living facility. There it was. The gentle, condescending push. At your age, he saw a little old lady who could be coaxed or frightened into compliance. I met his gaze. My answer is no, Mr. Vance. My neighbor's answers are no. We are not interested in selling. The charm vanished, replaced by a cool, businesslike demeanor. I see. That's unfortunate. The project will proceed, Ms. Delaney. The city is very excited about the jobs and tax revenue. I'd hate for you to be left behind when everyone else sees reason. It was a thinly veiled threat. After he left, I stood at the window. The fight was no longer abstract. It had a face and a black car. The fire inside me burned brighter. He thought his suit and his title intimidated me. He thought my age made me frail. He was so very wrong. The next phase was research. I became a familiar face at the public library, using their computers. My own was too old for this. I learned everything about Halcyon Properties. Their parent company, their projects, their executives. I read dry city council meeting minutes online, looking for mentions of the Maple Lane Redevelopment Initiative. I found it. A brief note from 8 months ago. Councilman Bryce, a smooth-talking politician, had enthusiastically endorsed Halcyon's visionary project. The vote for preliminary approval was unanimous. My street had been sold out from under us while we slept. Beatrice helped. Her niece, Clara, was a tech wizard. Clara, a shy woman in her 30s, showed me how to search property records, business licenses. One afternoon, she found something. Halcyon Properties LLC, she said, pointing at the screen. It's a shell company. It's owned by a larger holding company called Apex Development Group. We traced further. Apex was a maze, but buried in old news articles, we found a name linked to several of their projects, Silas Thorne. He wasn't a public figure. He was a behind-the-scenes power player, a man known for getting difficult projects done. He was the engine behind Halcyon. This goes deeper than a local VP, I murmured. We were up against a system. Meanwhile, the pressure on the street increased. Construction trucks began rumbling down Maple Lane, doing soil tests without warning. The noise was constant. For sale signs multiplied. The Millers caved, accepting a slightly improved offer. Their moving truck was a gut punch. Our united front had its first crack. Mr. Peterson stopped me as I walked. Told you it was a fool's errand, Martha. They have all the money, all the power. I looked at the sold sticker on the Miller sign. They have power, Leo. But we have this. I tapped my temple. And we're not done yet. With Clara's help, I drafted a formal appeal to the city council, challenging the zoning variance Halcyon would need to build higher density condos. I cited obscure bylaws about neighborhood character and green space ratios from my old files. It was dense, legalistic, and perfect. I submitted it in person. The clerk at the municipal office, a young man, glanced at it, then at me. This will go to the next planning committee meeting. You can speak for 3 minutes. I'll be there, I said. The meeting was in a cold, fluorescent-lit room. We were a tiny group, me, Beatrice, and a nervous-looking couple from 2 streets over. On the other side sat Adrian Vance, a team of lawyers, and Councilman Bryce, who gave them a familiar nod. When my name was called, I walked to the podium, my knees stiff. I looked at the bored faces of the committee. I kept my voice clear. I am Martha Delaney of 121, Maple Lane. This proposal violates the existing neighborhood overlay on 3 counts. I listed them, my words precise. I saw surprise, then annoyance, flicker on their faces. An old woman wasn't supposed to understand overlay districts. Councilman Bryce interrupted. Ms. Delaney, we appreciate your passion. But Halcyon's project has been thoroughly vetted. It represents progress. Adrian Vance spoke smoothly. We've addressed all standard requirements. Our environmental review is flawless. Flawless. The word stuck in my mind. Nothing is flawless. I request a full, independent review of the environmental impact statement, I said, my final point. The request was dismissed. My appeal was voted down, 5-0. As I walked back to my seat, Vance gave me a small, pitying smile. I had been a minor nuisance, quickly swatted away. But I had seen it. A flicker of unease in his eyes when I said, environmental review. I had thrown a stone into a dark pond. Now I had to wait for the ripples. The defeat was public. The local paper, which had briefly covered our plucky fight, now ran a small piece. Council approves Halcyon Vista, clearing last hurdle. Mr. Peterson didn't say, I told you so, but his silence was louder. I felt the weight of it. The condescending smiles from neighbors who had sold. The relentless noise of surveyors. I sat in my quiet kitchen, the fire reduced to embers. Had I been a foolish old woman, leading my friends into a battle they couldn't win? Then, I remembered the flicker in Vance's eye. Flawless. I went back to the basement. I pulled out my own copies of old environmental reports for the area. Our neighborhood was built on what was once called Mill Creek's floodplain. The creek had been buried in a culvert decades ago, but water has a memory. I compared the old water table maps to the one in Halcyon's public summary. Their map showed the culvert, but the associated flood risk zone was subtly minimized, shaved back just enough to fit their building footprint. It was a small thing. A tiny alteration. To most, it would look like a minor mapping discrepancy. But in my years at planning, I'd seen this before. A small thing done to avoid a costly geological survey or flood mitigation construction. If the water table was higher than shown, their underground parking garage would be a swimming pool. I needed proof. Not old maps, but current data. I needed to see the land, to remember what it used to be. I put on my mud boots and my oldest coat. It was time to go exploring. The back of my property line sloped down into a tangle of wild bushes and old trees, a no-man's land between Maple Lane and the back of a commercial street. As a girl, my son had played here, claiming it was a jungle. I pushed through the wet undergrowth, my boots sinking in the soft earth. The ground was consistently damp, even though it hadn't rained in days. I followed the feeling, pushing aside branches. And there it was, almost hidden, a crumbling concrete archway, half blocked with leaves and trash. The old entrance to the Mill Creek culvert. I peered inside. It was dark, but I could hear the faint, unmistakable trickle of water. This was it. The creek wasn't just a memory, it was still flowing, buried but alive. Halcyon's plans placed their foundation's edge barely 30 feet from this spot. Their flawless report said this area was stable and dry. My heart hammered with a hunter's thrill. I took photos with the cheap phone Beatrice's niece had helped me buy. I marked the spot with a bright piece of cloth tied to a branch. As I turned to leave, I saw a man in a hard hat standing at the edge of the cleared lot next door, watching me. He didn't wave. He just watched. The message was clear. I was being watched. My little walks weren't so invisible anymore. It didn't scare me. It energized me. They were worried. Good. I had found my crack. Now I needed to pry it open. But I couldn't do it with old maps and photos. I needed expert testimony. I needed someone who could turn my hunch into a weapon. I thought of everyone I knew. My old colleagues were long retired or passed. Then I remembered a name, Frank. Frank Wheeler. He'd been a young, brash geological surveyor who'd worked with our department sometimes. He'd loved arguing about soil samples. He'd be in his 60s now, probably. After 2 days of phone calls to old numbers, I found him. He was semi-retired, running a small consulting firm from his home. I went to see him, bringing my folder of maps and photos. Frank hadn't changed much, just thicker and with a full gray beard. He listened, peering at my documents. Martha Delaney, from planning. I'll be darned. He studied the maps, comparing halcyons with the older ones. He whistled softly. That's a significant alteration, he said, tapping the floodplain boundary. You think the culvert's still active? I showed him my photos. I heard water, Frank. The ground's like a sponge. His eyes gleamed with professional interest. To officially disprove their report, you'd need a new survey. Permits, equipment. It's costly. My hope dipped. Then he grinned. But for an old friend with a compelling mystery, I've got a simple resistivity meter in my garage. Gives a rough picture of subsurface water. It's not court admissible on its own, but it'll tell us if you're onto something. We'd have to do it, unofficially. Unofficially? I asked. After dark. Without anyone knowing. He looked at me, a challenge in his eyes. You up for a little clandestine operation, Martha? I thought of the watching man in the hard hat. I thought of Adrian Vance's pitying smile. I smiled back at Frank. It was the first real, fierce smile I'd felt in months. Just tell me what to do. 2 nights later, Frank picked me up in his dusty pickup truck after midnight. We were dressed in dark clothes. In the back was his equipment, a box with a screen and 2 metal probes on wheels. It looked like something from a sci-fi movie. We'll be quick and quiet, he said. We parked a street over and carried the gear through the shadows to my backyard. The moon was a slim crescent, offering little light. Perfect. We pushed through the brush to the culvert. Frank set up the meter, explaining in a whisper how it sent electrical currents into the ground to measure resistance. Water showed up as low-resistance areas. He began walking a slow grid, rolling the probes. I watched the screen, my breath fogging in the cool air. Green lines scrolled, forming a crude cross-section of the earth below us. Mostly it was a jumble, but then, in a consistent band leading from the culvert towards the halcyon property line, the lines spiked into a deep, consistent blue. There, Frank whispered, pointing. That's a saturated zone. A persistent high water table. Right where their underground structure is supposed to go. He took more readings, documenting. Their report shows compacted clay here. This is wrong, Martha. Dangerously wrong. We heard a rustle in the bushes nearby. We froze. A possum waddled past, oblivious. We let out held breaths. After an hour, we had our data. As we packed up, Frank looked serious. This is big. If they build without proper mitigation, that garage will flood. It could undermine the foundation of the whole building. But to stop them, you need a certified professional to do a full, permitted survey. That's the only thing the city or the courts will accept. How do we get that? I asked. You force their hand, he said. You take this unofficial data and you make enough noise that the city can't ignore it. You force a new review. I looked at the dark shape of the halcyon land. I had the first real ammunition. Now I needed a louder megaphone. I didn't go to the newspaper. They'd already written us off. I needed a different platform. Beatrice's niece, Clara, had an idea. Social media, she said. A community page. We can post your findings, the maps, the photos. We can tag local news, city council, environmental groups. It's harder to ignore a public outcry. I was skeptical. My world was letters and face-to-face meetings. But I trusted Clara. She created Save Maple Lane, the truth about Halcyon Vista. Her first post was simple: why is Halcyon Properties hiding the real flood risk? She posted side-by-side images of the maps, circling the discrepancy. Then she posted my photo of the flowing culvert with the text, Mill Creek is still here. Does Halcyon know? She used local hashtags. For 2 days, nothing. A few likes from neighbors. Then, a local environmental activist group shared it. Then another. A reporter from a bigger, digital-focused city news site messaged the page, "Can we talk?" Clara and I met the reporter, a young woman named Anya, at my house. I laid out the entire story, the old maps, the altered report, Frank's nighttime findings. I was careful. A retired geological consultant reviewed the public data and found alarming inconsistencies, I said, not mentioning our midnight trip. Anya's eyes widened. You're saying they fudged the environmental report to get approval? I'm saying the report is flawed, I said carefully. And the city approved it without due diligence. The people on this street, and the future residents of those condos, deserve to know if they're building on a potential swamp. Her article went live the next morning. The headline was bold: Maple Lane seniors claim developer hid flood risk, demand new review. The stone I had thrown was finally making waves. Big, public waves. The fallout was immediate. Adrian Vance called me, his voice tight with controlled anger. Ms. Delaney, these baseless accusations are slanderous. We will pursue legal action. The data is public, Mr. Vance, I said calmly. I'm just asking questions the city should have asked. A new independent survey will clear it all up, won't it? He hung up. An hour later, a city inspector arrived at my door, sent by Councilman Bryce's office. He was polite but dismissive. We're here to address these concerns from the news article. May I see the area? I showed him the culvert. He poked at it with a stick. This is an old, maintained drainage culvert. It's on the maps. There's no evidence of a broader issue. He was there to officially debunk us. What about the discrepancy in the floodplain maps? I asked. Cartographic interpretations can vary slightly over years, he said with a practiced smile. Halcyon's report used the most recent, approved models. He left, and I knew his report would say everything was fine. The system was closing ranks. My public shaming had gotten their attention, but not their compliance. That evening, as I washed dishes, I saw a different car slow down outside my house. It wasn't Vance's black sedan. It was an older, expensive-looking town car. It paused for a full minute, then drove away. A deep chill, different from Vance's obvious anger, went through me. Clara called, excited. The story's picking up. Comments are going crazy. People are calling the council members' offices. But the image of that silent town car stayed with me. We had moved from being a nuisance to a threat. And threats attract a different kind of attention. I had hoped to fight a company. I was starting to fear we'd awaken something bigger. A formal letter arrived from the city attorney's office. It warned that my public disinformation campaign could be considered interference with a legally permitted development and defamatory, exposing me to personal liability. It was meant to terrify me into silence. Beatrice was frightened. Martha, we could lose everything. Not just the house, but be sued. I held the letter, my hand steady. It's a scare tactic, Beatrice. They want us quiet. If their report is so flawless, why are they scared of a new survey? But doubt gnawed at me. Could they really sue me? An old woman on a pension? I called Frank. The heat's on, I said. I figured, he replied. Listen, I've been thinking. I know a guy. A real stickler for rules. Works for the state environmental quality department. He hates when local officials cut corners. If I send him the side-by-side maps and the news article, he might just open a file. A state inquiry would freeze everything. Do it, I said without hesitation. 2 days later, I received a visit from a man who was not from the city. He wore a simple suit and carried a state ID. Ms. Delaney, I'm Martin Croft, from the SEQ. We've received a complaint regarding potential discrepancies in the environmental review for the Halcyon Vista project. May I ask you a few questions? We talked for an hour. I gave him copies of everything. He was thorough, impassive. We'll be reviewing the file, he said. The project is on hold pending our preliminary findings. It was our first real victory. A stay of execution. But the pressure didn't lessen. It changed. The next morning, I found a dead rat on my front porch. Not from an animal. Placed there. A crude, ugly message. Stop. Beatrice found her flower beds vandalized. The watching feeling intensified. The man in the hard hat was always there now. The fight was no longer about paperwork. It had gotten dirty. And personal. The state involvement was a roadblock, not a defeat for them. Adrian Vance was replaced. We never got a formal notice, but he simply stopped appearing. The new face was a lawyer, a woman named Amanda Pierce. She was cold, precise, and made no attempt at charm. She requested a meeting with the remaining Maple Lane stakeholders. Only 4 of us were left. Me, Beatrice, old Mr. Peterson, who refused to sell on principle now, and the Wilton sisters, 2 quiet spinsters in their 70s. The meeting was in a sterile conference room. Pierce didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table. The state review will take months, she stated. During which time, you will all be living on a construction-adjacent lot with diminishing property values. We are prepared to offer a revised, final offer. 20% above the original. A one-time, time-sensitive opportunity. It was a classic divide-and-conquer maneuver. Make the offer good enough to tempt the weary. Mr. Peterson grumbled. The Wilton sisters exchanged nervous looks. 20% was real money. What about the environmental issue? I asked. The state will find what the city found, Pierce said flatly. No irregularities. This offer is a courtesy to end this disruptive chapter for everyone. We'll consider it, I said, speaking for the group. You have 48 hours, Pierce replied and left. Outside, the group fractured. 20% is more than fair, one of the Wilton sisters said. Maybe we should take it. They're bribing us to go away before the state finds their mistake. I argued. Or before they make our lives even more hell, Mr. Peterson muttered. But he looked at me. What's your play, Martha? You got us this far. I took a deep breath. We hold. All of us. We wait for the state's report. If we break now, we lose all our leverage. We have to stay united. I saw the doubt in their eyes. I was asking them to risk a life-changing sum of money on my hunch. The fire in me had to be enough to warm them all. I wasn't sure it was. The 48-hour deadline came and went. The Wilton sisters, after a sleepless night, accepted the offer. They apologized to me with tears in their eyes. I couldn't blame them. Mr. Peterson held firm, to my surprise. Hate quitters more than I hate developers, he grumbled. Beatrice held too, but her nerves were frayed. The vandalism and the dead rat had shaken her deeply. I'm scared, Martha, she confessed over tea, her hands trembling. I am too, I admitted. It was the truth. The town car kept appearing. Once, I saw a man sitting in it, just watching my house. He had a sharp face and wore sunglasses. I called the police. They came, took a report, and did nothing. No threat was made, ma'am. We were down to 3 houses, mine, Beatrice's, and Mr. Peterson's. 3 stubborn holdouts in a street of empty lots and sold signs. A lonely, ragged front line. Then, the state inspector, Croft, called me. His voice was guarded. Ms. Delaney, our preliminary review has identified procedural ambiguities in the floodplain assessment. We are requesting Halcyon provide the raw data from their geological core samples. It was huge. They'd found enough to dig deeper. What does that mean? I asked. It means if they can't produce the original data to back up their maps, the report is invalid. The permit would be revoked. Hope, sharp and bright, shot through me. We had them. They had altered the summary maps, but the raw core sample data would tell the true story. They would never provide it because it wouldn't match their claims. I shared the news with Beatrice and Mr. Peterson. For a moment, we felt victory within reach. But that night, my basement window was broken. Nothing was taken. It was just a broken window, a message carried on a thrown rock. The message was clear. Asterisk, we can reach you. Anywhere. Asterisk, the broken window was the final straw for Beatrice. I'm sorry, Martha, she sobbed on my doorstep the next morning. I can't live like this. I'm old. I'm tired. I'm afraid to be in my own home. She had called Amanda Pierce and accepted the offer. I hugged her, my heart breaking. It wasn't anger I felt, but a profound grief. The street soul was dying, house by house, friend by friend. Now it was just me and Mr. Peterson. Leo. He came over that afternoon, bringing 2 beers. He handed me one. To the last stand on Maple Lane, he said with a grim smile. We sat on my porch, watching the silent construction equipment. They'll come for you harder now, he said. I know. They think it'll be easy. One cranky old man and one stubborn old lady. He took a long drink. They're dumb. For the first time, I saw a spark of real respect in his eyes. We were comrades in arms now. The state's deadline for the raw data came and went. Halcyon requested an extension. Then another. This was the confirmation we needed. They were scrambling. Then, the town car returned. This time, the man got out. He was tall, thin, dressed in a dark overcoat despite the mild weather. He walked up my path. I stood my ground on the porch. Ms. Delaney, he said. His voice was smooth, almost gentle. My name is Silas Thorne. The name from Clara's research. The man behind Apex, behind Halcyon. The engine. He had come himself. This has been an impressive display, he said, looking at my house, not at me. Truly. But it's over. The state will get their data. There will be a minor delay, a fee paid. The project will proceed. You are now causing significant financial injury. That moves this from a negotiation to a different arena. He finally looked at me. His eyes were pale, calculating. You have 1 week to accept the offer currently on the table. It is the last offer. After that, we will use every legal and financial resource to not only take your property through eminent domain but to bury you in litigation you cannot imagine. You will lose your house, and you will spend whatever years you have left in profound debt and legal misery. You will be a cautionary tale. He delivered the threat without heat, as a simple statement of fact. It was more terrifying than any shout. He turned and walked back to his car. I stood frozen on the porch, the weight of his words pressing down on me. This was the end game. He wasn't fighting for a project anymore. He was fighting to win. And he had just promised to erase me. Thorne's threat was a cold blade in my ribs. This was no longer about outsmarting Adrian Vance or shaming the council. This was about survival. I felt the vast, impersonal weight of his resources. He could tie me up in courts for years, drain my life savings, and still take my home. He was right. At my age, time was not my ally. I told Leo Peterson. He listened, his face turning to stone. So that's it then, he said, his defiance finally cracking. We can't fight that. I don't know, I whispered, the fire guttering. For 2 days, I was paralyzed. I cleaned my already clean house. I tended my garden, the peonies now in full, glorious bloom. I felt like I was saying goodbye. I had fought the good fight, and I had lost to a bigger monster. On the 3rd day, Frank Wheeler called. Martha! The state just contacted me. Halcyon submitted the core sample data. It's a mess. The locations don't match their maps. The dates are inconsistent. Croft is livid. He's recommending full revocation of the permit and a fraud investigation. It was the news I'd been waiting for. But instead of joy, I felt a dull thud. Thorne had anticipated this. His threat was his answer to this very scenario. He would fight the state, tie it up in appeals, and crush me in the process. Frank, I said, my voice hollow. They sent the head of the beast to see me. Silas Thorne. He promised to destroy me if I didn't quit. Frank was silent for a long moment. Then you can't win by playing the environmental card alone. You need something else. Something that hits him where he lives. What does a man like Thorne care about? I asked, despair creeping in. Reputation, Frank said slowly. Not with the public, but with his peers. The banks that finance him, the other sharks he swims with. They don't care about a flooded garage. But they care about instability, about a partner who attracts too much heat, who gets sloppy. An idea, fragile and desperate, began to form. I couldn't beat Thorne's legal army. But maybe I could make me, Martha Delaney, into a symbol so toxic that fighting me became more costly than walking away. I needed to escalate beyond maps and data. I needed to tell a story no one could ignore. The story wasn't about a creek anymore. It was about a community destroyed. It was about bullying and threats. It was about an 78-year-old widow and her 81-year-old neighbor being targeted by a billion-dollar machine. I called Anya, the reporter. I told her about the dead rat, the vandalism, the broken window, the silent town car, and finally, Silas Thorne's visit and his explicit threat. He told me he would bury me in litigation until I died, I said, my voice clear and steady. He said I'd be a cautionary tale. Anya was audibly shocked. You have a witness? For Thorne's visit. Leo Peterson was inside. He heard most of it through the screen door. This is explosive, Martha. But it's your word against his. He'll deny it. I know, I said. But I want it on the record. All of it. Her next article was a bombshell. It tied everything together. The flawed environmental report, the state's fraud findings, and now, the alleged intimidation campaign against elderly holdouts. It named Silas Thorne. The headline was, David versus Goliath on Maple Lane. Seniors allege billion-dollar developer uses threats to silence critics. It went viral. Not just locally, but nationally. News outlets picked it up. It was a perfect story, vulnerable elderly versus a faceless corporation. Talk shows discussed it. Hashtag Stand With Maple Lane started trending. My face and Leo's were on TV. The pressure inverted. Now, the city council was flooded with calls. The mayor's office issued a statement about taking all allegations seriously. Banks and investors named in Thorne's other projects started asking questions. The financial heat Frank mentioned was being turned on Thorne. I was no longer just a nuisance. I was a public relations nightmare wrapped in a moral dilemma. And I was just getting started. The media storm was a shield. Reporters camped on the street. Camera crews filmed me watering my peonies. It was surreal. But it meant the dead rats and broken windows stopped. Thorne's people couldn't operate in the light. Amanda Pierce, the lawyer, called. Her tone was different. Conciliatory. Ms. Delaney, in light of the recent publicity, my client is willing to make an exceptional offer. To buy your and Mr. Peterson's properties at 3 times the original valuation, and to cover all your legal fees. A clean end, with no admission of wrongdoing. It was a massive sum. Life-changing for Leo and me. A quiet, comfortable end. For a moment, I was tempted. The fire was so tired. Then I thought of Beatrice, forced out in fear. I thought of the Millers, displaced. I thought of the silent, watching town car. This wasn't just about money. It was about justice. It was about proving that power couldn't always steamroll principle. No, I said. Ms. Delaney, be reasonable. This is more than fair. It's not about fair, I said. It's about the street. The project is flawed. The permits were fraudulently obtained. We want the project cancelled, the permits revoked, and the property sold back to the city for a public park, at the price you paid for it. She actually laughed, a short, sharp sound. That's impossible. Then we have nothing to talk about. I hung up. Leo was gobsmacked when I told him. 3 times, Martha. We could be set for life. And what about everyone else who lost? I asked. What about the principal? They broke the law, Leo. They threatened us. They don't get to just pay a premium and make it go away. I want the project dead. He looked at me for a long time, then slowly nodded. All right. Crazy woman. I'm in. To the end. We were no longer holdouts. We were revolutionaries. Our new demand, cancel the project, sell the land back, became the next chapter in the media saga. It was framed as the ultimate stand. Environmental groups and community activists rallied to us. They organized a candlelight vigil on Maple Lane, in front of my house and Leo's. Hundreds of people came, holding signs that said, "Integrity over profit," and "Remember Maple Lane." I spoke to the crowd, my voice amplified by a small microphone. I didn't shout. I just told the truth. This isn't about stubbornness. It's about a system that failed. It's about a company that thought rules were for other people. And it's about the idea that home, community, and truth still matter more than a spreadsheet. The crowd cheered. In that moment, I wasn't a lonely old woman. I was the leader of a cause. The next day, I was served with papers. A lawsuit from Apex Development Group. Defamation, tortious interference with business relations, and a slew of other charges. They were making good on Thorne's threat. The lawsuit sought millions in damages. It was meant to be the killing blow. But it backfired spectacularly. The news, developer sues 78-year-old widow for millions, was the lead story everywhere. Public outrage hit a fever pitch. Donations started pouring into a legal defense fund set up by supporters. A famous civil rights lawyer offered to represent me pro bono. The state, emboldened by the public support and the shoddy data, officially revoked the building permits and referred the case for criminal investigation into fraud. Thorne had played his last, worst card. And it had exploded in his face. The financial heat was now an inferno. His investors were in revolt. The banks were freezing credit lines. The Maple Lane problem was threatening his entire empire. The collapse was swift and silent from the public view. There were no more dramatic meetings, no more visits. The lawsuit against me was quietly withdrawn. The news reported that Apex Development Group was restructuring its portfolio. Then, a simple notice appeared in the paper and online. The Halcyon Vista project is hereby discontinued. All properties acquired for the project are being placed on the market. We had won. The project was dead. But it wasn't over. My demand had been specific. Sell the land back to the city for a park. The city, however, had no money. And Halcyon/Apex would sell to the highest bidder, likely another developer. I had slain the dragon, but the land was still scorched. Maple Lane was a ghost street of empty lots. It felt like a hollow victory. Then, an unexpected call came. From Councilman Bryce's office. He wanted to meet with me and community stakeholders. I was wary, but I went, bringing Leo and Frank. Bryce was all smiles now, the picture of a concerned public servant. Martha, Leo, what a journey. The public passion has been incredible. It's shown us the deep need for green space in our community. He unveiled a proposal. The city would use a mix of park dedication funds, fees paid by developers for just this purpose, a state grant for urban green spaces, and a portion of the money from the legal settlement the city was now pursuing against Halcyon for the fraudulent permits, to buy the land at cost from Apex. It would become Mill Creek Park, with a walking path, a playground, and a restored, day-lit section of the creek as a centerpiece. It was everything I dared to hope for. They'd found the money. The political will, generated by our very public fight, had made it possible. We'd like to name the park's central garden after you, Martha, Bryce said, oozing sincerity. The Delaney Garden. I looked at his smiling face, the face that had voted to steamroll us. I understood politics. He was riding the wave we created. But the result was right. The garden should be named for all the families of Maple Lane, I said. Past and present. He agreed. The deal was set in motion. The sale of the land to the city took months of paperwork. Leo and I remained in our houses, the last sentinels. Construction equipment was removed. Grass seed was sown on the empty lots to prevent erosion. One afternoon, a for sale sign went up in front of the Wilton sisters' old house. Then another. People were buying the surviving houses again, attracted by the promise of a future park, not a looming condo tower. The street was coming back to life, differently. Beatrice visited often. She'd bought a nice apartment nearby, but she missed her garden. "I'll have a bench in the park," she said. "I'll come every day." I finally met Silas Thorne again, though he didn't see me. It was at a zoning hearing for one of his other, uncontested projects. He looked thinner, older, his sharp face drawn. He was arguing passionately for his project, but the council members were cool, asking pointed, detailed questions they never would have asked before. His reputation was tarnished. The other sharks could smell blood in the water. He was fighting just to stay in the game. He never looked my way. I was beneath his notice again. But this time, it was because he couldn't afford to look. I had become a ghost that haunted him, a reminder of his overreach. I had fought back, and the shockwaves had cracked his foundation. I walked home that day, through the quiet, recovering street. The peonies had long since bloomed and faded, but the rose bushes were heavy with late summer buds. Life went on. Different, scarred, but resilient. The groundbreaking ceremony for Mill Creek Park was a bright, autumn day. The mayor gave a speech about community resilience. Councilman Bryce patted me on the back like an old friend. Reporters took pictures. I stood to the side with Leo, Frank, and Clara. We were the unofficial Maple Lane Irregulars. They handed me a golden shovel. I pushed it into the earth, feeling the rich, damp soil give way. The same soil that had hidden the creek, the truth. After the speeches, people milled about, drinking lemonade. A man approached me. He was in his 40s, dressed in casual clothes. "Ms. Delaney, my name is Daniel Miller." It took me a second. Miller. The young couple from number 18, the first to sell. "Of course," I said, shaking his hand. "We bought a house in the suburbs," he said, looking at the ground. "It's fine. But we drive by here sometimes. We saw the news. What you did," he looked up, his eyes sincere. "I'm sorry we didn't hold on. Thank you for fighting for all of us. For what was right." His words meant more than any plaque or garden name. He understood. It wasn't about winning a house. It was about defending the idea of home. Later, as the crowd thinned, I walked to the edge of the site, near the old culvert. It was marked with a ribbon now, protected, to be uncovered and restored as part of the creek. The truth wasn't buried anymore. It was being brought into the light, to be the heart of something new. I felt Thomas's presence then, not as a ghost, but as a memory of the strength he'd always seen in me. "We did it, Tom," I whispered. "We fought back." Winter came, then spring. My house on Maple Lane felt different. It was no longer a fortress under siege. It was just a home again, but one that stood as a testament. The park construction was slow, deliberate. They exposed a length of the buried creek, lining it with native stones. The sound of flowing water became a constant, gentle background noise in the neighborhood. It was a beautiful sound. Leo Peterson, to everyone's surprise, became the park's most devoted watchdog. He'd walk the site daily, pointing out to the foreman if a tree was planted crooked or a path seemed off. He'd found a new purpose. I still got letters, but now they were from other communities, other people fighting their own halcyons. They asked for advice. I wrote back simple truths. Find your crack. Get proof. Tell your story. And don't let them tell you you're too old, too small, too anything to fight for what's yours. One afternoon, I was in my garden, pruning the roses. A car pulled up. It was Adrian Vance, the first Halcyon VP. He looked less slick, a little worn. He approached the fence. "Ms. Delaney," he said, awkwardly. "Mr. Vance. I left Halcyon. Apex, rather. Before the end." He paused. "I wanted to say, I underestimated you. We all did. I was just doing my job, but I'm sorry for my part in it." I looked at him, this man who had been the face of the enemy. He was just a cog. "The job doesn't have to be who you are," I said. He nodded, looking relieved and ashamed. He got back in his car and drove away. I went back to my roses. The past was making its peace. It was time to tend to the future, one thorny branch at a time. Today, the Maple Lane Memorial Garden was officially dedicated within Mill Creek Park. A simple stone lists the names of all the families who ever lived on the street. Mine is there. Thomas's and my son's are there. Beatrice's. The Millers. Even the Wiltons. The park is full of life. Children play on the playground where the condo's lobby would have been. People walk dogs along the creek path. The old culvert is a small waterfall now, splashing happily into a clear pool. I sit on my bench, the one Beatrice claimed, and watch. Leo sits beside me, complaining about the new, modern sculpture they installed. Looks like a tin can got stepped on, he grumbles, but he's smiling. The sun is warm on my face. The fire inside, the one that kept me going through the fear and the fight, has settled into a gentle, lasting warmth. It's the warmth of peace earned, not given. They thought I was too old to fight back. Too old to understand their game. Too old to withstand their pressure. They saw white hair and slow steps, and they saw weakness. They saw what they wanted to see. They never saw the memory of a city planner, the love for a home, the loyalty to friends, or the stubborn, unyielding force of a principle. They never saw the will of a woman who had nothing left to lose but her dignity, and everything to gain by defending it. They were wrong. And in being wrong, they gave us back more than a street. They gave us a park, a purpose, and a story that will flow on, like the creek, long after I'm gone. I close my eyes, listening to the water and the laughter. The fight is over. We won.
If you enjoyed this story of epic revenge, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, and make sure to subscribe for more tales of calculated justice, revenge or karma, and let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Click the arrow button to watch more interesting stories. Please note, your support helps keep the lights on and the stories coming. Thank you.